These ancient stones have been here for millions of years, but can you guess what famous site was built from the stones in this valley? If you guessed Avebury, you'd be right. These stones are the result of groundwater cementing sand at the bottom of an ancient riverbed. To the Neolithic people, it must have seemed like someone or something had left them here on purpose. Stone building was a new concept in the Neolithic period. This place would have been a paradise for a Stone Age builder. The seeds of greatness had been planted here in the earth, waiting for those pioneering people who would go on to shape this landscape into one of the most important historic sites in the world. So I'm starting here, where it all began, before ending up at the world's largest stone circle, Avebury. I'll be deciphering these unique sites, trying to understand the beliefs behind their creation and the uses of these incredible places. I grew up around here, and not a lot of people know about this place. It's called Fyfield Down. Now, let me show you something really amazing. This is the polisher stone. These are man-made grooves which were around 5,500 years old. The workers would have come here to sharpen or polish their stone axes and chisels. The axes were used to chop timber, which was vital in the construction of megalithic sites. Stone polishing was relatively new technology in this period. It allowed for stronger and more durable tools. You can imagine people gathering around here waiting for their turn, getting a bit of respite from the back-breaking work. This field was more than just a building site. It was a sacred place, as you can see from our next stop. This is the Devil's Den. It's the entrance to a long barrow which is now collapsed, not the entrance to hell as the name suggests. Its name gives us an insight as to how the medieval people viewed these monuments. They saw them as something magical, but also as something sinister. When the Anglo-Saxons first came to this island, they believed the stone monuments were built by giants, as the technology to build something of this scale was completely out of their comprehension. In folklore, it was believed if you walk around the tomb 3 times and then underneath the capstone, you would summon the devil. This is known as a dolmen, which is a megalithic tomb entrance, typically consisting of 2 or more upright standing stones and a large flat capstone. We know that long barrows were not just places of burial. Other rituals and celebrations took place on the mounds, showing that this valley was more than purely practical. It was a holy place in its own right. Perhaps those buried here were pioneers in megalithic building. Perhaps they came from mainland Europe, bringing with them these new techniques, and to commemorate them, they were buried here amongst the stones. We are shifting elements from stone to water. A few miles away is Swallowhead Spring, the source of the river Kennet. It's a sacred site to modern-day Druids and neo-pagans. There isn't any evidence that it was used as a sacred place in prehistory, but what we do know is that a water source would have been important to the architects who built the next site along my journey, Silbury Hill. We can't say why, but in 2400 BCE, this mound was constructed by Stone Age farmers. You have to be really careful when speculating about sites like this, that you don't stray into unfounded territories, but it really is a mystery. Now, there's no evidence that it was used as a tomb or as a fortress. It took roughly 140 years to build. That's nearly 5 generations of workers. It was built by digging out chalk rubble, so it would have been white, with wooden palisades or terraces, very similar to a step pyramid. The chalk was dug from the immediate area, creating this moat-like feature. The key to understanding it lies in why it was built here, directly above a natural spring. At Silbury, water and earth don't clash, they converge. The flooding isn't a flaw, it's part of the monument. Perhaps a way to worship the water that runs beneath. In folklore, it was believed to have been the burial mound of a great king, and locals would go digging to look for treasure. Maybe someone found something, who knows? Recent theories have suggested that it must have been the work of a powerful dynastic family, so perhaps there was something in the old wives' tale after all. A few minutes walk away from Silbury Hill is the iconic West Kennet Long Barrow, roughly 6,000 years old, an ancient burial chamber, older than the Great Pyramids. The Long Barrow was in use for 1,000 years, but the chamber within was only in use for 30. The remains of 50 people were found in here. How important must they have been to earn the honour of being buried here? To those that buried them, they must have seemed like gods. If not in life, then certainly in death. And maybe, just like the Devil's Den, the people buried here brought innovation with them, perhaps farming techniques and the new religious beliefs that came along with it. During the Neolithic period, secondary burial was widely practiced. The bodies of the dead were left outside the tomb until they partially decayed. The remains were then reorganized and placed in the tomb. Other rituals and ceremonies also took place here. It wasn't just burials. These people had what's called a cult of ancestors. Those who passed on were worthy of worship, and what better place to do that at their final resting place? It's amazing that this place was in use for so long, but times were changing. The Bronze Age had arrived. And in one last final act, as if they were concealing their secrets from what was to come, the last Neolithic people put this 20-ton keystone over the entrance, hoping to seal it off forever. This place is where the living and the dead converge, and you can't help but feel that that barrier is a little bit thinner up here. West Kennet is the oldest site we're visiting today, but running between Avebury and West Kennet is this, the West Kennet Avenue, the longest stone avenue in the world. The stones are purposefully aligned in a snake-like shape, but we have no idea why they didn't choose to build in a straight line. During rituals, people would have walked from Avebury to West Kennet. It was more than just a processional route. The avenue itself was a holy site. Offerings have been found beneath the earth here. It wasn't necessarily about the destinations at the end. The journey itself was also sacred. I've reached the final stop on my journey, Avebury Stone Circle. It's 1.3 kilometres wide, more than 25 times the area of Stonehenge. The earthworks here were constructed around 2850 BCE. The ditch would have been 20 feet wide with a sheer 30-foot drop. It would have taken 1 million man-hours to build. The stones were added several hundred years later, but one of the stones has been here much longer. This is the Cove Stone. It weighs nearly 100 tons. Half of it is buried beneath the earth like a huge iceberg. It wasn't brought here from Fyfield Downs, unlike the other stones. It was already here, naturally occurring. Such a prominent feature on the landscape would have served as an ideal place for congregation. People may have been gathering here for years before the actual building of Avebury started. It's possible that this naturally occurring stone inspired the entire creation. It's been suggested that the stones could have been festooned with animal skins or painted in animal blood or even human blood, decorated with foliage or deer antlers depending on the seasons. It's hard to say because all we have left now are the stones. One theory proposes that the wide stones represent a woman's hips and the long phallic-like stones represent the men. As we know, Avebury is aligned with the solstice and may have links to fertility. Avebury was built over several hundreds of years, with generations starting work which they would never finish. In fact, by the time Avebury was abandoned, work was still in progress. It was never meant to be a finished product. The work was devotion to whatever gods, ancestors, or celestial bodies they worshipped here. Stone circles are, of course, a place of worship, and we believe Avebury is aligned with the movements of the sun, but it was also a place for burial. The grave goods found here were more simple than the ones found at Stonehenge, suggesting that perhaps this place was more of a communal centre than a centre of great power. As you can see, Avebury is so massive, there was enough space to build a village inside it. There's been a settlement here dating back to the Anglo-Saxon times. Many of the stones were destroyed and used to build the houses that you see here. During the Middle Ages, the villagers would build huge fires around the stones so they would become brittle. They would then be easier to break apart. It wasn't until the 18th century that the great William Stukeley pointed out how important this site really was, and the stones were left in peace. Avebury was the centre of Stone Age Britain, bringing isolated people together, a place for people to bury the dead, celebrate, and come together